Hello, my name is Daniel, and the following video is about brinicles, what a brinicle is, how they form, and the conditions that are needed for a brinicle to form. On this next slide, there's a picture of a brinicle right there. It's the piece of ice that extends from the surface ice down to the sea floor. You can kind of see the extension all the way reaching down to the sea floor. So, it was dubbed by Frozen Planet the ice finger of death. Some people also call it an ice stalactite because it grows downwards. But it's not just deadly, as we'll learn about later. It can also be productive. Before learning the conditions and learning how that they actually form, a good word to know is brine. Brine is water that is saturated with salt. This is important because it plays a key it plays a key role in the formation of a brinicle. You're going to need a lot of that brine in order for it to form. So certain conditions that are needed for a brinicle to form are you need a freezing conditions. Not only does it need to be below 0 degrees Celsius, it needs to be cold enough to freeze salt water. So depending on the salt that's in the water, it depends on what the freezing point is. The more salt you have in the salt water, the lower the freezing point. So the temperatures need to be cold enough to actually freeze salt water. These conditions are usually seen in above and below the above the Arctic circles. You can kind of see the red lines. So above above that Arctic circle and below the Antarctic circles, usually shallow water is needed, and a crack in the ice needs to happen for the brine to actually escape downwards, or it just needs a channel for the brine to flow through. This first tab, the first link that I provided, is a link for a video by Discovery, and it just shows the video from Frozen Planet that shows the formation of an actual brinicle. That way you can kind of get a background just to see it actually in motion. So once the surface layer of the seawater actually freezes, once it freezes, it allows salt to secrete out of the ice because the H2O actually freezes and it pushes the salt out. Now the salt, if it doesn't have anywhere to go, it's trapped inside. But because it has a channel through it, or once it cracks, the salt is allowed to mix in with water and it becomes brine. So you have this really concentrated water with a ton of salt in it that lowers the melting or the freezing point, not allowing it to freeze. So you have this colder than the water. The brine water is colder than the water surrounding it, which freezes the water around it. So since there's a lot of salt water since there's a lot of salt in the water creating brine, the brine is denser than seawater, so it flows downwards. Denser water drops to the bottom, the less dense water goes towards the top. As it sinks towards the bottom, it starts to freeze the water around it because the freezing point has been lowered. So it freezes the water around it, creating a tube of ice. The brine actually flows through the tube of ice downwards, creating more brine water because more salt water is pushed towards the center. More salt is pushed towards the center, creating more brine. And as it flows downwards, it's kind of like the same concept of a stalactite. It starts to freeze as it goes downwards. The more brine that goes downwards, the more it freezes. And as it goes towards the sea floor and touches the sea floor, it actually freezes everything in its path. So once it hits the ground, if there's creatures in the way, it just freezes it all, and it ends up killing it. That's why Frozen Planet dubbed it the ice sea finger of death. However, it was filmed relatively new back in 2011 by Frozen Planet. It's become popular because of the video. and currently it's being studied as its role as a chemical garden. There's some theories out there that it's not just destructive, that it actually could be a linking factor to the creation of life. And there's a theory that because of the chemical garden, it's given some properties that will actually start life, just like in a hydrothermal vent. So there's some similarities between the Brinicles and the hydrothermal vents that are now popular for study. That way we can figure these out, hopefully pretty soon, to confirm or deny these theories about the beginnings of life. If you'd like to read further, I've applied 2 links. One's through the MIT Technology Review, and one is by Dr. Cartwright. She has a really good article out called The Brinicles as a Case of Inverse Chemical Gardens. It's just about the potential for brinicles to be a source of life on Earth. Thank you for listening to my video. I appreciate it.